Welcome to the Grand Prix 24/7 podcast, your weekly insight into the world of Formula One. Hello and welcome to the Grand Prix 24/7 podcast. I'm your host Will, and I'm joined as always by Ben Stevens and Paul Velasco to discuss the Bahrain Grand Prix, which was very much overshadowed by one incident in particular, that being obviously the incredibly scary crash involving Romain Grosjean. Luckily, he has confirmed that he's largely okay, suffering some bruised ribs and some minor burns to his hands and feet. Ben, just to start with, a truly shocking incident and one that none of us ever want to see in Formula One.
No, not at all. It's something, especially people of my and your age might have heard about in years past, but you thought that this could never happen in Formula One in the current era, where you just see a car just go up in a fireball like that. So it was very scary stuff, and thankfully everyone's walked away okay.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing it was one of the most shocking images I can remember seeing since I started watching Formula One. Paul, I guess same question to you.
Well, look, I think we've got to remember Fernando Alonso's crash in Australia that one year was absolutely horrific. However, the difference was this one was the fire, and it was just absolutely. I think there was a moment where everyone thought the worst. I mean, when they first of all they weren't showing the replays, I thought, okay, this is going to be terrible news, and but fortunately, it was a miracle. For me, it's a miracle in the desert, simple as that. And I'm just so happy Romain is alive and he can talk to his kids. And because, I don't know, maybe I'm a pussy like that, but the minute I saw that go down, the images I had of his family watching this, I thought, oh my God, this is horrific.
The fire is what makes it so shocking. Obviously, motorsport is a lot safer now than it has been in the past, but we mustn't forget death of Jules Bianchi and obviously last year with Antoine Hubert in the Formula 2 race. So as much as things are a lot safer now, the risk and danger can never fully be taken out of the sport. And everyone who was watching was fearing the worst until they confirmed that he had managed to get out of the fire. And the pictures that we saw afterwards were truly shocking. Ben, I guess the first thing to talk about really is the incredible safety standards in the current cars and the incredible response of the medical car driver and the doctor.
Yeah, it's a testament to their professionalism, how well they sort of handled that. And what was great, I think great to see is, like, you don't really think about the guys in the medical car because they're so often or so rarely called on to do anything of significance. But to not only see them have to leap into action then do that, but also sort of even you could argue sort of go beyond the Call of Duty a little bit, where they're actually running towards the flames with an open helmet on, no visor. Like, that's just bravery. That's not your job. That's just being brave, and that's remarkable to see. So yeah, massive respect to them, massive respect to the marshals. Yeah, it's as horrifying as the accident itself is. That was all fantastic to see.
And Paul, I think that when you look at how long Grosjean was actually stuck in the car or spent in the car with it completely on fire, I think it's unbelievable that he managed to come away with such minor injuries and compared to what our worst fears were.
Yeah, I mean, it took an age for him to come out. I mean, we were working it out. We had a clock on him. It was 20 seconds or something before you got a glimpse of a movement. And again, I've got to reiterate what you said about the medical car guys. They were out there. The boys, it was like, I've been in those kind of situations, under fire situations, and really you can just see these guys were super, super cool, calm. They knew exactly what to do, and it was 100% admirable. And I think these guys, if you're looking to give a medal to someone, these two guys deserve. In fact, Alan's got to be driver of the day, in my book. So yeah, I think just kudos to everything. But I'd like to bring back the halo thing. I mean, the halo saved Grosjean's life before the fire even started. His life was saved because the halo split the barrier. You know what I'm saying? Romain would have been split in half today. We'd be gluing him together in a morgue. That's how bad that thing was. But the halo just absolutely saved his life. And I'm being graphic about it because that's exactly what it is. Halo took the brunt, and if you look at it, the halo looks intact. He wasn't an advocate of the halo, and I don't want to hold it against him, but I'd like to remind him that, Romain, you weren't a big fan. And he came out of it and he said, if it wasn't for the halo, I'd be dead. So everyone, from Jean Todt, who we've had a go at more often than we maybe should, and the reality is the whole organization from the 10, 15 years ago, the first guys who did the prototype designs, the reality is on Sunday, it saved a life for everyone to see. It's not the first time, but this was the most graphic. It didn't only save from impact, it saved the guy in the fire. So the fact that he didn't pass out, that he wasn't knocked out, is again an incredible tribute to the safety. And thank you, guys. Thank you for everyone involved. You saved a life.
Yeah, I think that the halo certainly did save him there. And it makes it unbelievable to me that people were ever opposed to that system. And I think that, Ben, this definitely puts to bed any arguments about this being the right choice.
Oh, you would certainly hope so. I think and this is sort of the tricky thing about any sort of safety in motorsport, is that because it's inherently dangerous, you can sort of understand where, there's a concern, whether it's valid or not, there's a concern that, safety is always going to sort of affect the fabric of the sport. And I think that's what a lot of the concern around the Halo was prior to its implementation, is that, this is an open cockpit series. You're sort of getting away from that with a Halo. And that's, it's not going to be F1 basically anymore if you get it in there. And as much as those concerns might be valid in their own way, they don't really matter at all, as we've seen, compared to the reality of what they're there to do, which is save lives. And that's what matters. As Paul said, the fact that he can walk away and, hug his children, that's down to the Halo. And so, yeah, it doesn't really matter what's people say in other respects. It's there for safety. It's there for safety, and it's done its job.
Everyone these days, you get in a car, you put on your safety belt. Boom. Unless you've got no brains. Okay? That's de rigueur. You don't even think twice. When they instigated those laws in the 80s or the 70s, I don't even remember when. I just do remember, because my grandfather was a driving guy and he loved driving and stuff. They hated it, mate. They hated the fact that they had to wear seatbelts. Can you believe it? And that's how progress has come, is that, you've got to accept the Halo for what it is. These cars are blisteringly quick. They're projectiles. And as we saw, you can have as much runoff area. If it's a freak accident, like this was, but we'll get into the cause of the accident later. But let's call it freak in terms of that it hit the barrier in that way. And then I would say, you've just got to accept it. You've got to accept that this is part of Formula One, making it safe. And I'll tell you what, if you asked any of the greats, anyone that lost anyone in Formula One, and they will tell you straight, I wish the Halo had been around. And I'd like to end this little snippet that I'm saying here by quoting Mrs. Bianchi, Jules's mom. She told the journo that her son died because there was no Halo. And tonight we saw Romain get saved because of the Halo. I think that just says it all.
I think that the word you used as well about it being a freak accident is a really important point to zero in on, because this wasn't a place where you'd expect someone to crash just on the side of a straight. It took something unusual to happen. And the thing is that obviously we have areas which are more likely to have a crash end up in. So, for example, where Alex Albon went off, that's obviously somewhere where you usually expect a car to crash when they run wide and then lose their grip. This wasn't where you would expect a Formula One car to crash. But the thing is, it only takes one incident for something shocking like this to happen. And I think that there are still some questions to be asked. And I think if anyone listened on BBC, Jack Nicholls went into a really good point about this, talking about how Ross Brawn is 100% right to say that they need further investigation to this. Because the way that Grosjean went through the Armco barrier, there have got to be questions about whether the Armco is the best solution to have there. And, perhaps if there had been a tyre wall, for example, the situation wouldn't have happened with him going through and the car being split in half. And I think that there still needs to be an investigation into exactly why this happened, because the way that fire went up is incredibly dangerous, and you probably won't get so lucky again, even with the amazing safety procedures. What do you think about that, Ben?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the thing, is sort of, because we've been focusing understandably so much on Grosjean, you just add to that the fact that, I mean, how lucky are we that the marshals happen to be standing 10 meters away instead of 5 meters or 3 meters? What would have happened to them? Or the fact that, the tether failed on the car and there was a tire bouncing considerably far away from the crash site. What if that had hit someone? So you're right. Like, there's all these things that we have to look at. And it's obviously starting with the barrier, so that, it doesn't happen again. And as much as it's about protecting the driver, there's things to be done there, but there's things to be done to protect everyone at the racetrack that have to be looked at.
Yeah, it also actually, Paul, got me thinking about the aero screen as well. And Grosjean actually climbed out the front of the halo rather than out the top of the car. And you think that the aero screen that they use in IndyCar, he would actually potentially not been able to get out. So it shows that you can't ever rest on your laurels when it comes to safety, and there needs to be constant investigation as how to make things better. Obviously, it's not something that can ever be perfect, but they can't ever rest on their laurels and say, oh, Grosjean survived this and he will in the future.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at that's a very, very good point you make, because straight after the start, when Lance's car flipped, he also went through that little window on the cockpit. He didn't come out at the top. You know what I mean? So, and that's one thing that you're right, that the aero screen won't have. What if the car's stuck upside down and the guy's trying to hit the aero screen out? I'm not sure if he punches the aero screen, if it pops out. I don't know, but that's a very, very, very valid point, and I hope someone's listening, because that could be the matter of life and death. Imagine if that would have been a shield and he's in there and he can't get out. I mean, that would be horrific. Very good point there, Will. Look, regarding the cause of the accident, I have to address the elephant in the room, okay? I'm very happy he's alive. I'm very happy he's going to see his family. I'm delighted. I had the good fortune of meeting Romain Grosjean when I worked at Dubai Aerodrome several times, because the GP2 Asia series was based at the Dubai Aerodrome. So we had 3 or 4 rounds there, and the teams were all based there, and there was always press conferences. So I got to know him, and I got to work around him, got to see how his vibe is. We maybe had 1 or 2 one-on-one conversations when he put it on pole or he won a championship, but, it's not like we mates or we know anything. But I got to see him operate. And he was a very, very fast driver, not liked by many, quite arrogant at the time, but absolutely a talent, and fast-tracked by Renault straight up to the top. But the reality is he crashes a lot. And this weekend, it was again him. He's very accident-prone. So I'm not hitting Romain and saying, the guy's a bad guy. He's a lovely guy, but the reality is he is very questionable in wheel-to-wheel racing. And again, this was a first-lap incident.
I do agree. That's the thing. It's you don't want to bag on him, because he's obviously, the outcome is so unfortunate. But like, I'm watching the replays as we speak, and he sort of just comes across and isn't aware of Kvyat on his right rear tire. Like, he's just, it's just like sort of that absent-mindedness. Yeah. Yeah. That's that's, as you say, that's been a hallmark of his F1 career, is just these sort of brain farts. And I'm not sure I'd go as far as you, Paul, in saying, like, I hope he, like, I think it'd still be nice to see him just from, to come out for the last race in Abu Dhabi, and if he's recovered, I think that would be nice. But in terms of past that, like, if the result wasn't as bad as it was, we'd all definitely be saying, well, yeah, this is further proof that this is why the guy's leaving F1, because he just makes too many mistakes.
Yeah, I'm very conscious of because I understand completely what you're saying, Ben, that had this not ended so dramatically and so dangerously, everyone would be saying, oh, typical Grosjean. I do think that he sometimes, because he's built up this reputation over the years, gets blamed excessively for things that aren't necessarily his fault. I think back to Russia last season when he came together with Giovinazzi and Ricciardo, and kind of, because Grosjean was involved, everyone's like, oh, it's Grosjean. So I do think that his reputation can kind of influence the way people see incidents that involve him. In this situation in particular, I do think that he probably wasn't able to see Kvyat, and the way that he did move across so dramatically did make me think that potentially the debris that actually hit his tyre, if you saw Karun Chandhok analysing it, had some kind of influence and just made his steering slightly more dramatic. I do think it probably was mostly his fault, but given the scale of the incident, I don't think that we should be pointing fingers just yet, although I definitely understand both your perspectives on that. Obviously, we've had the news that Pietro Fittipaldi will replace him for Haas at the Sakir Grand Prix next weekend, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gave up racing altogether for a while at least, because that is a pretty traumatic thing to go through, and I can't imagine how you recover from something like that, especially when you've been sat in a car that's completely on fire for 20 seconds. I certainly wouldn't be rushing to put my race suit back on. I just wanted to get the perspective of both of you actually on the way that the whole thing was dealt with. Obviously, we've seen Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo being critical of the world feed for showing the replays and almost treating the incident like entertainment. I kind of come down halfway on this, I suppose. I do think that sometimes it can be treated like that, but also I do think it's important to understand what happened and for the public to understand what happened, because then that makes moving forward and finding a solution easier. Maybe it could have waited a little bit and maybe there were a few too many, but I don't really quite know exactly where I stand on this just yet. Ben and then Paul, what's your kind of opinion on that?
Yeah, I'm sort of in the same place as you, I think, Will. I do get where the drivers are coming from. And the thing we've got to sort of remember is the way they're viewing that is different to us, because they're just getting the video. So for them, it's just they're standing around the pit lane or discussing things with their teams in their garage. They see the replays, but that's all they see. So what we're getting is the commentary and the explanation, which is the important part, is that they have to go together. If you're just seeing this, crash with this massive fireball over and over, you can understand why if you're Ricciardo or Vettel and you're supposed to go out there and race after that, it's sort of like, it seems like it's just like, oh, cool explosion. Like, that it's just promoting the explosion. But for us, I thought it was very helpful to have that, but then also, in my case, watching the Sky feed, all the team there, starting with Martin Brundle on down, actually being able to talk through it and explain what's going on. And as F1 have come out and said themselves, they made sure that Romain was okay beforehand. So, in that respect, I think they were being respectful. So, I honestly, I don't know what you would do differently, because it's just sort of an unfortunate, it's not even the right word. It's just a reality of the situation that they're not getting commentary. Everyone at home is, and that's the important part.
Well, I think it's damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I'm going to say to the director of Formula One TV, he did a fantastic job on the day. He would have done it as I did it. Look, let's look at it. And I get the driver thing. I've been around drivers when there's been death at a racetrack, so I understand that whole vibe. 24 hours ago, these guys, anyone can drive these things. I mean, just put me in a simulator and I'll drive it. And I think there was a big reality check on Sunday evening, which we all needed. This is a very, very violently... There's no other sport in the world where you can watch the guys at the very, very pinnacle and they can die at any moment. I think that's the important thing. That's a box that ticked. So Danny and all those guys that complain, I say to you, it just made you guys braver, bigger heroes than ever before. Okay, because this is what can happen to a racing driver. Okay, and worse, you can die. So there's no other sport when on a given Sunday the guy's going to run on and he might not ever see his mom again. Okay, that's the reality, and I think that came home to us more so probably since the Jules Bianchi crash.
We're so desensitized to watching these cars go around at different tracks every single week that we kind of forget that the pure act of just driving the car and going at that incredible speed is incredibly difficult. Just because we see it so regularly and the drivers are so good at what they do that they make it look easy, it doesn't make it easy. And it doesn't make it not dangerous. And unless those drivers had such amazing control of those cars, then we'd see a lot more crashes. And if they weren't so brilliant, then it would be a lot more dangerous. So we're just kind of desensitized to it because we see it and they make it look so easy.
This doesn't only happen in Formula One, hey? This happens in every level of motorsport, probably more, in fact, more so. Tin tops burning and sports cars burning. So today, that Sunday wasn't just about how safe Formula One is. It's about the level of motorsport in general, that people must realize that it actually is a very dangerous sport, and that the drivers are actually heroes, and that the people, the marshals, the guy who drives the safety car, the unsung heroes, they're all heroes. So I don't know. I mean, you got to take it. You can't take negatives out of that. It's a miracle. It was a miracle that Romain is alive. So there's no negatives when it comes to a miracle. So we've just got to look at the positives, and we've got to move forward, and we just got to celebrate that the guy's alive, and our sport's actually very, very good when it comes to safety,
I'm very much looking forward to hearing what Ross Brawn and the investigation finds, and I hope that they take the findings of this incredibly seriously and make the appropriate changes. I know we have gone on for quite a while now about this incident, but I do think we should have a brief discussion about the race itself. Obviously, there was a large stoppage following Grosjean's incident, but then we do have also Lance Stroll being turned upside down after an incident with Daniel Kvyat. Hamilton obviously goes on to win, fairly comfortable from Max Verstappen in second. Ben, as a race itself, obviously, they kind of had this whole incident with Romain Grosjean looming over it. But what did you make of it as a spectacle, and how did the results kind of play into the narrative of the season?
Well, as far as races in Bahrain go, where we usually get better than average, I'd say this was definitely below average. It was very much Lewis in control the whole evening, just cruising to the finish. No surprises there, though, really. Behind that, I guess it's a little bit more interesting, maybe not in terms of the on-track action so much, but in terms of, the fight for third that Paul loves so much, which is still alive. I mean, you've got Racing Point, we're going to probably extend their lead, and then, the misfortune for Sergio Perez and Lance Stroll happened there. And now all of a sudden it's really sort of narrowed up again. And that'll be something to sort of, keep watching as we go forward. Who ends up on top there? No idea. I think the other big thing is that Ferrari clearly aren't part of that threesome. It's a threesome. It's not a quartet. They clearly just don't have the pace, which is maybe some people thought after Turkey, where they had a very good result, they did. That's just not the case. That's about all I've got. I mean, as you say, it's you're sort of just thinking about that with Grosjean so much. It's sort of hard to take much else away from the race.
Yeah, in a weird way, I'm probably actually grateful that we just got a fairly dull, not necessarily so incident-strewn race after those opening laps. And Paul, in terms of the championship, it's already over, so I think we already knew this was going to be a bit of a damp squib. But not the greatest race ever, but given the circumstances, probably not that important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also you got to put yourselves in the place of the drivers. As you said, they got unprecedented images. I'm sure 20, 30 years ago, if Graham Hill or Jim Clark or whatever got out of their cars and looked at some of the crashes that their friends were having, they wouldn't be racing drivers for very long. But these guys were treated to non-stop replays. So I think it was very difficult to handle, and I would imagine it would have impacted them. And in fact, there was a stage where it was a proper stalemate. No one was in DRS zone. I think everyone just wanted this race to end. And I think, Lewis kicked a home run. Valtteri's tripped up. Max chased. It's the usual. I mean, I can almost do it off by heart. It's and of course Ferrari were Ferrari. They're shitbox. And what else is there to talk about? McLaren. I mean, I just love Norris. I love Norris. Always there. He's always and so kudos to them, because they sort of dipped and they kind of needed a big result. So I think that was really good. Lance Stroll, Sergio was super, super unlucky that the guy hasn't got a drive, and he's just delivering at probably the highest level ever. And for that to happen, and I think he just, after the first puff of smoke, I don't know if when you guys were watching, I just got this impression that he thought, okay, stuff this. I'm going to drive this thing until it burns. And it just smoked, and then very rare for a Mercedes to blow up. So, very unlucky for him. And, I think ultimately it wasn't the greatest of races. But, I think as I've mentioned before, we were just very fortunate on the day.
Absolutely. I felt incredibly sorry for Sergio Perez. It's just add insult to injury. Not only does he lose a third place and a podium, but then Alex Albon, the guy who's essentially fighting with that Red Bull seat, it is the guy to pick up the slack. So yeah, difficult day for him, but he kind of put it into perspective, I think, incredibly well, saying that on a day where Romain Grosjean could have been killed, that's the fact that he's still alive is the most important thing, and perhaps that podium here or there is not so important. Hopefully next week we'll see a much more standard race and no such dangerous incidents. I'm sure we're all interested to see how Pietro Fittipaldi gets on in the Haas, and we're also incredibly excited to see how the new Bahrain ring, oval or outer loop or whatever people want to call it plays out. The first time we've ever done that, so I think that will definitely add some intrigue. Thanks to Ben and Paul for discussing this with me, and I hope that we did this incredibly sensitive topic some justice and didn't upset anyone in the process. We'll be back later this week maybe to talk about the race in a little bit more detail rather than just specifically that one incident, and then preview the Sakhir Grand Prix. But we'll speak to you then. Bye-bye.